Okay, members, we'll resume the sitting. It's time for questions to the Minister of Finance, and I call Mark Durgan to ask the first question. Mark Durgan.
Question number 1.
I call the Minister. Conor Murphy.
The Department for the Economy is responsible for and has been leading discussions locally on the public service obligations for City of Derry Airport. Nevertheless, when I met with the British Transport Secretary Grant Shapps on wider airport issues last summer, I raised the issue about which London airport the Derry flight might use. More widely, my department is working with the Department for Infrastructure, who are assessing a business case and funding proposal made by the airport. The current London and any potential PSO for a Dublin service will be important elements of future operations at the City of Derry Airport.
Supplementary, Mark Durgan.
Would the Minister agree with me on the importance of City of Derry Airport to the North West and the importance of the Executive Departments working together with Council to ensure that it not only survives but that it thrives?
Yes, I absolutely agree with him. It is a key and integral part of the need to rebalance our economy and to ensure that infrastructure that we have, including airports, roads, rail, all allow us to allow the North West to maximise its potential, and for too long it hasn't been able to do that. So I'm fully in agreement in relation to that. I also agree that it is across a range of departments. My own department stepped up, as it did on a number of issues during the pandemic, to provide support to airports, but the Department for Infrastructure, the Department for the Economy are areas where various aspects of airports relate to. There is no overarching department with responsibility, but it is important, and I did propose both to Infrastructure and Economy that the three departments, myself included, work together closely to try and ensure, both in terms of dealing with London but also in terms of dealing with Dublin, that we get all support that we can and we ensure the long-term security of the City of Derry Airport.
Call Ciara Ferguson.
Mr Speaker, Minister, the City of Derry Airport obviously provides vital connectivity to the North West, so as we concur with Mark, any additional support and public service obligations to the City and the airport is hugely important. Can the Minister also confirm if the airport will be included in the package of rate reliefs contained in the upcoming budget? Thank you.
Well, there are the airports were included in terms of rate relief, and that was obviously recognising their huge economic importance, both the two Belfast ones and the Derry one in particular, and recognising their huge economic importance to the regions that they serve. We are looking at the issue of further rate relief in the new financial year, and of course those businesses will have benefited from a 2-year rate relief at this stage, and obviously, thankfully, business is starting to return again, although we're still a long way short of where we want to be, and we still have some journey to go to get out of the pandemic completely. But yes, of course, we can look at those, and we are looking at packages in terms of rate relief across a range of businesses. It won't be at the same level that we were able to provide with the additional COVID money we had during the pandemic, but we will continue to try and support those businesses who will continue to struggle as we emerge back into hopefully full economic recovery.
Call Mike Nesbitt.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the Minister. Airports and airlines are a critical part of our economic structure, and it's vital they're supported. Not my words, the Minister's. Can the Minister update us on the COVID mitigation package for the Belfast International and Belfast City Airport? And I welcome what he's already said about future rates relief.
Well, and we are talking to the airports continuously in relation to the challenges they continue to face, and undoubtedly they do continue and will continue to face challenges. The issue is we don't have the same level of additional COVID money that we had, so the Executive is limited. There are, as he will understand, a wide range of competing demands, and there are also, in the course of the pandemic, we stepped up. We don't have any responsibility for airports, but we did step up to try and provide support. So we do need to see the departments between them, and I'm not allocating to any singular department. I'm saying collectively, and as an executive, there's an understanding that more support is needed. We have to have the departments work on that to make an assessment of it, but also then to make an assessment, as I would, of what funding we have, and to match that against the competing priorities. But we are keen to help if we can in the time ahead, and we do fully understand the importance of the airports.
Call Kelly Armstrong.
Question number 2.
As the member will be aware, the draft budget is currently out for a 12-week consultation period which ends on the 7th of March. As soon as possible after the budget consultation period ends, I will bring a further paper to the Executive outlining consultation responses and seek an agreement on a final budget. There is a legislative requirement for a budget to be in place before the beginning of the next financial year, and it is therefore imperative that a draft budget is agreed by the Executive ahead of the upcoming Assembly elections. Such an agreement would allow departments to plan and deliver services appropriately, providing public services the stability that is afforded by a 3-year budget settlement. I am under no illusion that the timetable is challenging, and it will be important for the Executive to work collectively in agreeing a budget.
Supplementary. Kelly Armstrong.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and thank you, Minister. Minister, as you say, the budget timeframe is extremely challenging, and we have heard over recent weeks that there may be an attempt to collapse the Assembly. If that happens, what protections can you put in place for all of those community and voluntary sector and organisations who will be left without a budget?
Well, we have to ensure that that does not. Firstly, any threat to collapse the institution should be removed, and as I have said in recent days, the rest of us are getting on with the work that we need to get on with in the time ahead, and we can't allow ourselves to be distracted. So I want to see the budget consultation process, because this is the first 3-year budget in many years that this Assembly and Executive have dealt with. It does give an opportunity for planning. It doesn't contain the amount of money we would like to see in order to support our public services, but it is vital for giving particularly some of the services, as she has referenced, that certainty and continuity in the time ahead of a 3-year budget outcome. And so I think it would be cynical in the extreme to deny those people the opportunity to get that level of support. And of course, we will continue to work to try and ensure we do get executive agreement, we get the budget through in due course, and make sure we give some certainty to those who most deserve it.
Melissa McHugh.
Concordia. Minister, as is already the case that some departments have commented on the difficulties that they face, especially if health is prioritised. And whilst there are obvious pressures, can you confirm that this is the most difficult budget that departments other than health have to face?
Well, the budget that I have produced recognises and supports the priority that the executive parties and generally speaking most of the MLAs in this institution have stated many times over the last number of years, that health is the priority, that we need to assist health in terms of transformation and bringing down waiting lists, dealing with issues like cancer treatment and mental health issues as well. And so the budget I proposed reflected that. That has created a pressure on other departments because we have looked for some efficiencies to try and support that. But departments are getting a year-on-year increase in their budget, and while it's not all that they would want to have, it's certainly the outcome of the spend review is not all any of us wanted to have. Nonetheless, it is an increase year-on-year, and it will be up to departments to try and prioritise the spending of that budget over the next 3 years around areas that are priorities for them and that can be met within the settlement they receive. So I would hope that all parties will recognise the commitment that we all made to try and support health in the time ahead and get together and support the budget proposals and recognise that we all will face challenges in doing that, but that is a very necessary prioritisation.
Steve Egan.
I thank the Minister for his answer so far. Could the Minister confirm that if there is no agreed budget by the end of the financial year, in fact going forward we're limited to 45% of the budget total in year, and this would mean a significant challenge to all our public services?
Well, as he understands, if it was the case, and as I say, we shouldn't be contemplating that that will be the case, and I think any threats to bring us into that circumstance should be removed. We are a short distance from the end of this mandate. There's a lot of work to be done both in this chamber and in the executive as well, and we need to conclude that work. We've only had a 2-year mandate essentially, given where we were, and so. But if it was the case, he's correct. The worst case scenario, Permanent Secretary can ensure funding continues to that, but it is at that limited level, and it doesn't give anywhere near the level of certainty to an awful lot of organisations who depend on it. And given that we have a 3-year budget to put in place, that is an opportunity to give certainty and allow for planning into the future.
Keith Buchanan.
Nobody disagrees that health needs additional money to address issues within it. Nobody would disagree with that. But are you content, as the Finance Minister, that the Department of Health is in a position to manage money effectively? Bearing in mind the amount of money is spent on locum doctors and agency staff year on year, and that at the end of 2025, 52% of our budget will be to the Department of Health. Are you content that they are managing money effectively?
Well, there's no doubt that the attempt to transform the NHS over many, many years by introducing privatisation into it has actually, in the professed expectation it would create efficiencies, has actually created much greater inefficiencies. And you can see that certainly in recruitment of agency staff, that creates a huge inefficiency where we should have actually been recruiting people into the health service itself. So that hasn't been the solution. I'm sure the Executive do, and we've had discussions around the Executive about this, we want to see the additional money that we're providing to help, the timetable for how that will be spent, the milestones which we would judge it, the outcome as it goes along in each of those big areas in terms of waiting lists, transformation, cancer treatment, mental health, those issues that we want to see how that will be spent. And clearly the Assembly itself will want to get an understanding of all that. So we have been working and will continue to work with the Health Department so that there's a very clear sense of how that money will be spent in the time ahead, and to make sure that this investment, which is very, very necessary, will be actually used in an efficient way to create that type of transformation.
Nicole Liz Kimmins.
Question 3, please.
The future of the Mournes is one of my priorities, and I have therefore asked the Innovation Lab team within my department to lead a project aimed at securing the long-term sustainable future of the Mournes. Executive colleagues have nominated departmental representatives to participate in this project. As part of the project, the team will engage with local stakeholders to gain an understanding of the key issues. This work has commenced, and it's hoped that an event can be held in the locality of the Mournes in the near future to bring stakeholders together. A high-level project plan has been developed which sets out key project activities. The plan takes account of the impact of the forthcoming election and the restriction that this imposes on public engagement. The Innovation Lab team is also developing a business case to secure external expertise to conduct the public engagement.
Supplementary, Liz Kimmins.
I thank the Minister for his answer, and I think we all know that the Mournes wildfires caused significant ecological damage, and it is so important that we get the recovery plan in place as quickly as possible, not only to support the Mournes as an area of outstanding beauty, but also in the longer term. So can the Minister confirm then if an executive agreement on the plan has been reached, when does he expect implementation to begin, given all that he said in his response? Thank you.
Well, I can assure I agree with the member firstly in terms of the absolute necessity to protect the Mournes both now and into the future. The Executive are on board, and each department have provided representatives to work with the team doing that. The work of the Innovation Lab will include a review of existing research as well as commissioning of additional expert research should this be needed, and there will also be a series of research engagement events with cross-section of community to include focused citizen engagement sessions, and the purpose is to enable the development of a long-term plan which essentially will include the community and stakeholders in the Mournes, and I expect this work to be completed later this year.
They call Peter Weir.
Mr. Speaker.
Cancora, with your permission, I will answer questions 4, 8 and 13 together. I wrote to the Chief Secretary of the Treasury on the 11th of November last year, calling them to waive VAT on energy bills temporarily to support the many households and businesses struggling with the cost of living and spiralling energy prices. I have not yet received a response to my letter, and officials have followed up on this with their Treasury counterparts. And while this is disappointing that the British Government does not appear to be prepared to cut VAT on energy bills, I will continue to call on the Treasury to take urgent action on the cost of living crisis.
Peter Weir, supplementary.
Thank the Minister for his response. It's disappointing there hasn't been a direct response as yet. Can I ask the Minister whether there's been any other discussions with Treasury on any other financial help that can be given to hard-pressed families at this time of the, particularly with the rising fuel costs in terms of energy, and any additional schemes beyond what has been announced already?
Yes, I recently, in the last number of weeks, did a four-way meeting with the finance ministers from Scotland and Wales, in which we collectively pressed Treasury on these issues. We are assured that there will be a spring statement sometime towards the end of March, a bit late for including in our current financial process, but there will be a spring statement which will address cost of living issues. Now, we don't have detail of what that might include, but we will continue to press the case for support, as he has outlined, for very hard-pressed families.
Call Trevor Lunn.
And I thank the Minister for his answers so far. I was going to ask the same supplementary as Mr Weir, but And maybe in looking at this in reverse, Mr. Speaker, has the Minister, what examination has he made of the prospect of revenue raising and locally here, which would start to deal with the problem perhaps from a different direction?
Well, as I'm sure the member knows, I've established a fiscal commission to look at the prospect of economic levers that we don't currently have. We're a long way behind Scotland and Wales, who have had a number of iterations of looking at this. This institution has never, since 1998, taken a very detailed look at what might be available to us. Unfortunately, that takes some time, and if the report, I would hope it may be available before the end of the mandate, but it will be for an incoming executive to look at. That would then, if there was a political will to move and look at some revenue raising options for us, then that would require a negotiation with Treasury. So I don't think any of those issues would be in time for this 3-year budget cycle, but probably towards the latter end of the next mandate. But I think it is incumbent on us to look at a situation where our budgets are so tight, when there are emergency situations which are unforeseen and outside of our control, like the increase in energy costs, then what interventions we can make are very, very limited. I think we should have all fiscal levers at our hands that we can in order to make sure that we can intervene where is necessary as per our own judgment in this part of the world.
I call Stephen Dunn.
I appreciate the update on this important matter. Another issue adversely impacting a number of sectors here, including our construction sector, and even things like charity tractor runs, is the UK Government's plan to end the red diesel rebate. Has the Minister made any representations on this important matter?
Yes, we have had an ongoing discussion on this. The first iteration, I think, this was affecting pleasure crafts and things like that, so we've had engagement with them and we will continue to do that. I know it is tied up in the kind of reduction of carbon emissions as well, an attempt to do that. But yes, we recognise the very strong cases made by construction and some of the charges, and I know many of the members will be have been lobbied on that by people in the construction sector. So while we want to make sure that we are getting to more reusable energies and renewable energies rather, that we ensure that the impact of that isn't so severe that people aren't able to cope with the journey that we all need to be on.
Call Carol Hunter.
Speaker, I'd like to thank the Minister for his answer so far. Minister, my question refers to the Energy Support Scheme. We all know the difficulties with rising energy costs, and many people experienced difficulties before Christmas. Can I just ask why it took until January for this scheme to be unveiled? Thank you.
Because it took that length of time to get the Executive to agree it. The Communities Minister raised the issue with me immediately after the October monitoring round, and we asked departments to indicate earlier than normal to us what monies they may surrender in January monitoring, so we could get a sense of what type of scheme could be put together. We did put that together over December and asked for executive agreement, but it didn't get that level of agreement until January, unfortunately. I think both myself and the Minister for Communities would have preferred that the scheme was in earlier and able to reach people earlier than it has done.
I call Andrew Muir.
The 3-year budget that is ahead from April has a massive opportunity to tackle fuel poverty and also address the whole issue of the climate crisis. What's the Minister doing to ensure that that 3-year budget is actually climate-proof and is able to deal with the issues that have been discussed here today?
Well, that type of policy issue will be a matter for the Executive as a whole, brought forward by those who have responsibility in that area. In terms of energy, it would be probably a combination of economy and DAERA. And of course, yes, the Executive has its own overarching targets in relation to that, and that is faced by a real challenge which is outside of our control about rising energy prices and the ability to support people in that. So it would be a matter, rather than for the Department of Finance, which makes propositions in relation to the budget, but in terms of that overarching policy, would be a matter for the Executive as a whole, led by the departments who have responsibility in that area.
Call Jim Allister.
As an advocate for the protocol, surely the Minister knows that Article 8 and Annex 3 of the protocol retains Northern Ireland within the EU VAT regime, and in consequence that VAT regime says the minimum level of VAT that's allowable within that regime is 5%. And therefore, if the UK Government in GB reduced and removed the 5% on energy, it couldn't apply to Northern Ireland, courtesy of the protocol. And it's his ideology of subservience to the EU that is denying energy users that opportunity.
Well, firstly, in terms of the protocol itself, my officials did liaise with the Department of Economy when writing to the Treasury, and Both energy and VAT are included in the protocol to some degree, although they are complex areas. As such, we cannot give a definitive view on whether a notification to the EU would be required for the support to be implemented here in the North. However, as I have said, VAT is an accepted matter, and the Treasury would be responsible for seeking a derogation should one be required. The protocol provides for a joint committee to regularly review the implementation of VAT provisions. But I also understand that both Spain's government passed emergency measures to reduce the cost of heating and electricity bills by reducing VAT from 21% to 10%. And the Czech government announced a VAT waiver on electricity and gas supplies in November and December due to the energy crisis. So quite clearly there are flexibilities permissible under the EU rules.
Call Steve Egan.
May I thank the Minister for his answers so far. I think the key question has just been outlined by my friend from North Antrim, is the issue about where we get to VAT and how we get to that point as well. Is the Minister proposing and is making recommendations to the Joint Committee that Northern Ireland has looked in particularly favourable, because the Minister is aware that indeed Northern Ireland is probably in a worse position of fuel poverty than anywhere else in our nation?
As I've said, in terms of energy matters, we liaise through the Department of Economy, who advise on these issues. It would be up to Treasury to seek a derogation should one be required. And if that, as I say, there is a provision at the Joint Committee to review implementation of that provision. So if it is such a derogation would be required, we'd expect that to be raised through that mechanism.
Call Paula Bradshaw.
I have encouraged the Minister for Economy to consider whether there is a need for further financial support for businesses. As I noted in the Assembly on the 25th of January, I am happy to work with any minister who wants to bring forward a proposition for sectoral support, and I am happy to make a recommendation to the Executive on that basis. Ministers will, however, have to bring it forward to me. I cannot reach into another department and make their case for them. Nightclubs and similar establishments are covered by the Omicron hospitality payment, which I announced on the 23rd of December past. They have also benefited from 24 months of a rates holiday since April 2020. Under the plans I announced in the budget, they will have no rates to pay in the first 3 months of the next financial year. Officials from my department have also been working with representatives of the hospitality industry on proposals for retrospective support for nightclubs to compensate them for the period of time that they were required to remain closed while other businesses could reopen.
Supplementary, Paula Bradshaw.
Mr Speaker, and thank you, Minister, for your answer. You will appreciate, of course, that I submitted this question before your financial statement in the House last week. So can you confirm or otherwise whether the Economy Minister has actually brought forward any proposals? And also on that latter point there around engagement, you'll appreciate that while the nightclubs and the bars will have some access to grant funding, there are people like DJs and musicians and bands members who are outside of that, and if that is something that your officials can engage around. Thank you.
Well, as the member says, we have included on the advice of the Department of Economy only not last weekend, the week before last, advice in relation to hotels, and we agreed to add them into the scheme. She will know what hospitality or support for businesses is not my area of responsibility, but LPS have thankfully agreed again to step up to that task. In relation to other people in the associated supply chains of entertainment, some of those would fall under the ambit of the Department of Communities, and others will fall under the ambit of the Department of Economy. And as yet I have had no bids in relation to those matters, but I do think communities have been looking at some schemes, but it really is, as I said in my opening answer, up to those with policy responsibility to bring forward a proposition supported by some evidence of need, and I'm very happy to make a recommendation to the Executive on that basis.
Call Pat Cadney.
Yes, thank you. And Minister, thank you. Minister, I know that it may not be it's the Department of the Economy, but Minister, there is no doubt that you have a huge underspend throughout the Executive, while small business and suppliers of our nighttime economy have gone without support. Why is this money sitting in your coffers, and could it be used to uplift our hospitality industry?
Well, firstly, as he was here last week when I did the January monitoring statement, and I had supported all bids that came in for money. So every bid was met, and there is a proportion of money left over. We are challenged next year in terms of our budget, so the objective of myself and the department would be try and maximise our carryover to try and support public services in the next year, but also to spend out where there are very good cases for support now in relation to some people as are continue to be affected by the ongoing pandemic that we're still experiencing. So again, I'm quite happy to look at cases that are made by other ministers. It's not an idea of money just languishing in the coffers. That money can be carried over, and we're currently in discussion with Treasury about the limits to the money we can carry over. We hope to carry over as much as we possibly can, because we do know that even with the 3-year budget we have, that a lot of public services are going to continue to be challenged. But if a case is made for some of the businesses he has outlined, I'm very happy to look at that.
Roy Beggs.
Through the Minister's department, he will be able to find out if there are some of this hospitality sector that have not been given any support to date. It would be helpful if you could let us know that. But secondly, would he ensure that those hotels who may have been fully let by government agencies providing food and accommodation, that they would not benefit because they have no need to benefit, they're operating at full capacity?
Well, I think the payments have been made out, and now there's cases being made for hotels to include them into that additional 40 million scheme. I think brings it up, I think, somewhere in the region of another £2.5 million. There's an identified number of hotels that have been provided to us by the Department of Economy that they say require support, and we are content to pay out on that basis. We don't have the ability to decide in other sectors within the tourism or hospitality area and say, we think those people, the case has to be made to us for that level of support. So, B&Bs and guest houses or other things may not be included in this scheme because it has not been identified to us by the Department of Economy as requiring of support. And so we operate on the advice that we're given from those who have policy responsibility for that and put together a scheme to provide support. In relation to those who have had other business, I mean, hotels and hospitality have not been required to close. Nightclubs haven't been required to close over this period, but there is a recognition that they lost a lot of Christmas trade, which they otherwise would have got. If there is a case to be made that others didn't lose that, then I'm certainly happy to look at that, but that case I don't believe has been made to us.
Nicole Robin Newton.
Mr. Speaker, question number 6.
No funding has been returned to Treasury in respect of non-ring-fenced resource DEL, which funds the ongoing cost of providing services. While no capital DEL was returned in 2018 or 19 or 2020-21, unfortunately 81.1 million was returned in 2019-20. This was primarily due to delays in projects due to COVID and a delay in signing a contract for a health project as it required further due diligence. Ring-fenced resource DEL is provided for non-cash accounting transactions in relation to depreciation or impairment, including student loans, and it can only be used for that purpose. And as such, 537.3 million of the total available has not been required over this period. Members will be aware that the restrictions on the use of financial transaction capital and the difficulties this has caused. As a result, 270.3 million has not been utilised over this period.
Supplementary, Robin Newton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Minister for his answer. Minister, you have at your disposal the Public Spending Directorate that is there to offer you advice on maximising the resources available to Northern Ireland, advising on their allocation, ensuring the effective use of available resources through allocation monitoring and public expenditure. Given the level of expertise and support that there is there, is it not amazing that we are indeed sending money back to the Exchequer?
Well, as I outlined in my answer to him, in terms of the resource which is used for public services, none has been returned over that time period. Some capital has been returned, just over 81 million in 2019-20, and I outlined the reason for that. The onset of the pandemic stopped construction, and there was a significant hold-up in a health project, which was to consume a lot of capital. In relation to those other costs, that's money that's available if it's required for a specific purpose. And if it's not required for that purpose, it can't be utilised. Financial transaction capital we can improve on, and I have said that to departments that it can only be engaged for in very specific ways over a 25-year period. But I have said that departments need to step up and look more closely at how they can utilise that. So we certainly can do better in that regard. But it's not a case of having money that we had at our disposal to spend and handing that back, apart from that 1 year in relation to capital.
That ends the period for listener questions. We'll move on to topical questions, and I call John Stewart. And topical question 10 has been withdrawn, and I call John Stewart.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Minister, can I ask for an update on the rates process for 22-23? Any rates holidays that businesses or non-commercial premises will receive, and when businesses and homeowners can expect their bills to land on their doorstep?
Well, we have signalled intention to continue on. Some of the, bear in mind, an awful lot of businesses have had a rates holiday for 2 full years, which is a very substantial support to them, but very necessary over the course of the pandemic. And I have had the opportunity over recent times to be out engaging with businesses, and I've heard at first hand how much they value that and the business support that was given to them as well. So there is a proposition to look at all businesses for the first month in the new financial year, as a consequence of the COVID rates order that's going through, and then to look at a range of businesses for a 3-month extension as well in the time ahead. That's part of the budget consultation process, and once that's agreed, we'll be able to give certainty to businesses. But we are, as I say, intending to do that for 1 month for all businesses, 3 months for targeted businesses.
Supplementary, John Stewart.
I thank the Minister for his answer on that. Definitely the rates holidays and that business support has been well welcomed, particularly by our city, village and town centre businesses. Unfortunately, many are still paying more per square foot than out of town centres. If we're really truly serious about town centre regeneration, do you believe the time has come now to rebalance and reevaluate those town centre and village businesses so they can compete and flourish to see the town centres that we actually want to see in our local areas?
Well, I think I would share his desire to make sure town centres and village centres are supported and sustained as best we can. And that would be a question for rates policy. And we will be looking at rates policy in the time ahead. We're looking at revaluation, but we're also looking at business rates generally. And we have taken significant steps, albeit because of the 2-year holiday. Quite a lot of people would not have experienced it, but we had effectively reduced business rates by 18%. Over this period as well. So we will continue to look at that in the time ahead and to see where more targeted supportive rates can apply and have the sort of effect that he has mentioned.
Mervyn Storey.
Mr Speaker, the Minister will be aware that back in August of 2001, CPD, for which he holds responsibility, issued the procurement advisory note because of the challenges to some 248 contracts. Will the Minister give an assurance that those contracts that have been adversely financially impacted, particularly I'm thinking of schools in my constituency, will get the support, the help and the financial support that they require to ensure that the contracts are able to proceed?
I'm very happy to look at that case. We have, as he knows, revamped the procurement board. We have looked at procurement policy guidance notes. And we're now bringing those through the executive to make sure that they have the full authority of the executive attached to them. Part of that is a tidying up exercise, looking at some of the previous policy notes and what they produced. And if there's a specific case in relation to those contracts, I'm very happy to look at it and come back to the member.
Supplementary, Mervyn Storey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Minister for that commitment. And also, will he, given the fact that there has been some financial capital transaction money that has been set in reserve, will he look at that, and is it possible to use that money to be of help in terms of trying to ensure that those contracts that were let and were agreed but now there's a difficulty with will be able to proceed?
Well, as I said in answer to a previous question, of course I don't think we are making full or as full use of financial transaction capital as we could. It will, in my view, apply to projects which have a 25-year lifespan. I'm sure some of the school estates project would have that. So I would be encouraging the Education Minister to look at where they can avail of that, because there are sums available to us to utilise on that, and our capital budgets are challenged. There's no doubt about that, particularly when we come to year 3. So anything which can supplement those, I think, is of value. But it's really for the individual departments to look at the specific project and say, we think this fits into a financial transaction capital model, and then we will certainly support that.
Dolores Kelly.
Mr Speaker, Minister, you may be aware that 70% of calls to the police every day are from people with vulnerabilities, particularly mental health vulnerabilities, and the Chief Constable's recent announcement of not being able to recruit because of the cuts. I just wonder, Minister, in terms of the 3-year financial statement and budget going forward, what consideration you have given to meeting the ambition of the new decade, new approach of over 7,000 officers?
Well, I do think, with the challenges that the central question is, do we agree health is a priority, and do we agree to try and give health the transformational funds to do all of the issues that I'm sure are dear to her, as many other hearts, in terms of waiting lists and cancer treatment and mental health issues, and that does then put a squeeze on all the departments. There's absolutely no doubt in that. But every department has an increase in their budget. And there is, I think, ring-fence money in relation to policing as well, which probably wasn't identified in the Fiscal Council's report. So what we want to do is to continue to support departments as best we can, and we do say to ministers when they prioritise their own budget, and they have a significant degree of latitude within their own budgets to prioritise, that we should be looking to issues which were commitments that we all made collectively coming back into the executive, like NDNA. So I would look to the Department for Justice to meet those commitments in the time ahead, and certainly, in my view, while budgets are much tighter than we would want them to be, there is the ability to meet commitments such as that in the time ahead.
Lois Kelly, supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would agree that health is a priority, for every party here. But how is health defined across all departments? Because health is impacted across housing, it's impacted across educational outcomes, it's impacted in our prisons, it's impacted by the police in terms of the calls that they make. So, in terms of putting the money towards health, how is that defined, and what collaboration is there across the executive?
Yes, I think you're quite right. There's much more to health than the health department itself, although it is obviously the primary responsibility in that regard. And the big issues of our time in terms of tackling our waiting lists, our cancer treatment services, our mental health issues, and the reform of the health service itself, because it has become a kind of machine which continues to consume public finances, and if we don't do something to alter that, that will continue to grow. So in 3 years' time, when whoever is in this position is trying to set a budget, they will have a much more challenging outcome than we currently have, and our outcome at the moment is challenging. So it is defined across a range of departments, and we do look to other departments to come forward with propositions and policies in relation to working collaboratively together, and also to promote the general health and well-being of the community.
Paul Kelly-Arshaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Minister, just take you back to the idea that there may or there could be unspent capital or revenue funding. Could I ask, is there any opportunity for communities to tap into this money, if that money is available, to assist the construction industry?
Well, if there was unspent money and we're likely to exceed our limits in terms of carrying over resource and capital into the next year, which is going to be very much needed to try and supplement budgets of a number of departments, including perhaps even the conversation with the last questioner we were having in relation to the Department for Justice. There's no doubt, and the community ministers have already indicated, that Housing Executive, in terms of refurbishment work, can absorb some of that if there is unspent resource, and carry it through to the next year to make sure it's spent out then. So it will be one of the options that we do look for at the end of the financial year, if it is the case that we may exceed our carry-over limits.
Kelly-Arshaw, supplementary.
Thank you very much, Minister. Construction, as you know, is vital if we are to achieve the housing strategy and end homelessness across Northern Ireland. I'm just wondering, is there any joint departmental working with yourself to support our construction industry, especially as we have a real lack of people coming into the industry at the moment, and how much work, as you say, we need for the Housing Executive, for instance, going forward?
Yes, well, we obviously work with construction through the procurement board, but there also is a construction forum as well to address issues, because we have a range of responsibilities for building regulation matters as well. But obviously it's an interest that transcends just the Department of Finance, and Department of Economy in particular would have an interest there on infrastructure, given the huge contribution construction makes to our overall economic performance here. So yes, I think it is vital that we try and work closely with them in the time ahead, that we make that cross-departmental, and wherever some resources can be made, they not only contribute to employment, obviously, but if you are improving the housing stock, you're contributing to a reduction in heating costs, but you're also contributing to health and well-being as well.
Call on you, Murphy.
Can Collier, and I'd like to thank the Minister for his answers thus far. Minister, the draft budget allocates a 10% increase to the Health Department over 3 years to support the Executive's commitment to prioritising health going forward. It is vital that we now use the opportunity to implement the structural transformation of the health and social care system that is so desperately needed. How will the multi-year budget allow us to take a more strategic approach to implementing the required health reforms?
Well, as I think I said in answer to a previous question, and a number, I suppose, of the questions that have arisen in the context of discussing the budget, we have agreed to prioritisation of health. We now have an opportunity to match that with sufficient resource to allow it to get on with tackling some of the big issues in health, but also in that transformation piece. Health has the I suppose, charge it is put in terms of public finances has increased year on year. And if we are ever to get that under control, then we need to take that strategic 3-year approach to try and reduce that. Or an incoming executive or whoever setting the budget in 3 years will have a much bigger challenge than I currently have. And so it is important now that we finally have a multi-annual budget to try and put that resource in to effect the sort of change that is needed, both to support the health of our population, but also to ensure that public finances can be brought under some measure of control in terms of health spend.
Supplementary, Anya Murphy.
I'd like to thank the Minister for his answer. As the Minister is also aware, the COVID-19 pandemic has had a huge consequence on our health system, not least our ability to deliver specialist treatments such as cancer, elective care and as well as that mental health services. Will the draft budget provide the resources necessary to get the health system back to delivering these vital services?
Well, that's the intention, and we did give a very significant additional amount of cash to health over the course of the pandemic to try and cope with the pressures it was facing, undoubtedly, and to try and give support to our healthcare staff over that period, and we will continue to try and support them into the future. But yes, we want to transform, and that's why I think we need health to advise us as well as to how this money has been spent, what the outcomes intend to be, and how we can measure that, or an incoming executive can measure that over the next 3 years to make sure that the additional money that I hope we do agree to put into health then achieves the outcome that the executive wanted to.
Call Joanne Bunting.
Through you, could I ask the Minister what action he will take to financially assist those who are going to be hit with a hefty bill with regard to cladding and high-rise accommodation?
Yeah, we agreed on behalf of the Executive again to undertake this at the Department of Finance. Again, no singular department has responsibility, and we have already gone out with a scheme in relation to buildings above 18 metres that have SEM, aluminium combustible materials on the cladding. In doing that, we also did a search as to what other buildings around that height level have other cladding material which, again, might not consider to be suitable. And I think it identified, off the top of my head, probably another 13 or 18 perhaps buildings that might come in under that. What we will do is try and identify the cost of that, and we've been working with the Department of Communities and the Housing Executive to look at that, to identify the cost. And if we've already agreed for the SEM, the funding available, and we're working through the details on that with the particular building that it applies to. There's only one building that it applies to here in the north. But in relation to the others that may come in under another category, we're already working through that to look at that and engage with the Housing Executive in terms of perhaps it taking a responsibility for dealing with that issue.
Supplementary, Joanne Bunting.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister will appreciate that I have some constituents who have been in receipt of estimates for literally tens of thousands of pounds, which could have significant detrimental impact on them and their properties. And I'm thinking particularly here of private owners or private landlords. So if there is to be such a scheme that people can tap into, how will this be made accessible to people, and what are the timeframes for such a scheme?
Well, those are some of the details that we're working through at the moment. We're trying to look at the model in Britain that they've been developing, where there's a singular department that deals with this, where they've obviously been able to engage with financial institutions which are beyond our responsibility here, to make sure, as well as making sure people are safe in their own homes, and if these things need to be changed and they need support, that we do that, but also to make sure that we protect the public purse. So where it is responsibility of private landlords and others who perhaps are responsible for certain aspects of fire safety, that they carry the burden that they're supposed to carry. So we have to make sure that what we're paying out for is absolutely necessary. And in that regard, we are looking to how this scheme has been developed in England, because they have much more resource to do that, but they also have that level of engagement with financial institutions and others to make sure that the public purse is paying where it needs to pay. So I would hope that that can be developed as quickly as we can, and I hope that we continue to work with the Housing Executive to make sure that the primary interest, I'm sure, of herself and us all is to make sure people feel safe in their own homes and that they can afford to continue to live in their own homes. But we have to make sure that those who are obliged in terms of the private responsibility step up to the mark in relation to that as we do with the public one.
Members' time is up, and we move on to the next set of questions. But members, take a ease for a moment, please.